I'd like to welcome you as we gather once again as a virtual community of faith on this solemn occasion of Good Friday. One of the most important days in our liturgical calendar, the day that we have been coming towards for the last 6 weeks. And so we invite you to make yourself comfortable as we come together on this Good Friday as God's people in worship. Today is one of the gray areas of the Christian year, a day when the lights are dimmed and the skies feel overcast even if it isn't, a day when theologians and poets feel as if a heavy veil is drawn over heart and mind, an inexplicably sad day.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of this day.
We resist the gray areas, prefer to see everything in black and white, look for cloudless sunny skies, try not to read between the lines, throw in a bright color or two to try to enliven the scene.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of this day.
In the gray light of early morning, after a night in the ecclesiastical high court and denied by one of his own circle, Jesus found himself at the gate of the reluctant Pilate, who promptly tried to hand him back to the Jews.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of this day.
And though the sun rose that morning, the whole world turned gray for one who found himself without friend or helper. Faced with drinking a cup he'd pray would be turned away from him, knowing that life was about to be drained out of him.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of this day.
We are invited to accompany Jesus through this gray day, to be witnesses to his suffering, to keep silent before his cry of dereliction. In our imagination, let us trudge through Jerusalem until we come to the place of the cross, and then let us not turn our faces away.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of this day.
In this gray day lie all of the sorrows and failings of a humanity that strives for high success, yet comes up against human limitations and falls to the ground in despair. A humanity whose peace plans give way to guns and whose political promises become papers in filing cabinets.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of this day.
Here is a day marked by the brokenness of the world, but it is not a day to wallow in misery or to indulge in morbid thoughts about the crucifixion. It is simply a somber, dignified day when we remember how it was for Jesus and find at the foot of the cross a place to lay down ours and the world's sorrows.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of the day.
On gray days, it is hard to see clearly, difficult to understand things that aren't clear. Yet all we are asked to do today is to be present to the sacred story as it is retold and to the inexplicable, mysterious, wondrous transaction that was and is still taking place.
We come to be with you, not really wanting to face the reality of this day. Yet here we are, walking throughout the night with you, Emmanuel, God with us, love incarnate.
After Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with the disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back in its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me?"
In some ways, it was all too predictable. Of course, I knew where Jesus would be. We had met in that garden many times. So when they asked me if I would be willing to give him up for a bag of silver, I knew exactly what I would do. Why wouldn't I? This is not what I expected was going to happen. It's not like I planned this out. But Jesus was also not who he was supposed to be, was he? He was supposed to be the Messiah, the chosen one, the one who would come and get rid of the Romans for us. But no. The Romans are still here, and it doesn't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon. So what's the point? All this talk about love, compassion, mercy? What does any of that mean in the face of the Roman occupation? We have been waiting for so long for this Messiah, and Jesus comes speaking about love rather than freedom? So I did what I thought I had to do, and I got paid for it. Sure, many might call me a traitor, but I was waiting for something that would make a difference in the world. Did I get it? No, I didn't. So who is the real traitor here? I feel so lost, so confused. Jesus really never did anything that horrible, but they still want to put him to death. I wonder if maybe true strength actually lies in the words and actions of Jesus and not the power, influence, physical intimidation, and prestige that the chief priests, scribes, and Pharisees seem to wield. It can sometimes be also confusing. But what is done is done.
Shadows gather deep and cold, and my feet
So the soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him. First, they took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter was standing outside at the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it and warming themselves. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said." When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered, "If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, and they asked him, "Are you not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it. And at that moment, the cock crowed.
He was right. He said that I would deny him, and he was right. I was adamant that would never happen, and yet the rooster just crowed. And 3 times over the course of the night, I said that I didn't know him, that I was not a follower of his, and that I had nothing to do with any of this. I don't understand. I have followed him since the beginning, and now I have abandoned him when he needs support the most. I never thought that it was going to be this difficult. I never actually thought it would come to this. I mean, really, we are just a harmless bunch of people speaking about love and peace, speaking about justice and mercy. I don't understand how we got to this place. What did we do that was so wrong? Are Jesus' ideas about love that dangerous that they would need to arrest him and put him on trial? I don't think so. But if they were that harmless, why didn't I just admit to knowing him? I am so afraid because I really don't understand what is happening. All I know is that because I am afraid, I have denied the one that I love. Maybe these words that he has been speaking are that powerful. Maybe Jesus' words and actions are something to be feared. But why? All these people with power scheming to get rid of Jesus, like what we were doing, had threatened everything that they had. Could that really be the case? Maybe what Jesus was doing was going to change everything. Oh God, what have I done?
Old and faithful servant,
Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusations do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So, you are a king?" Jesus said, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" And after he said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him, but you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a bandit.
They are letting me go. This makes no sense to me at all. In all honesty, I deserve to be here. I, after all, am a thief, and yet the crowd has demanded that I be set free, and in my place they are going to put on trial this one who I can't really say has done anything wrong, other than to talk about love and peace. Well, he has said that he was sent by God, but I have heard of many others who have said the same thing. So what is different about this one? It is actually kind of funny. I heard that some of his followers think that he is the Son of God, and that might be why they are going to put him on trial. But my name, Barabbas, actually does mean Son of the Father. How strange is that, because I am the one who is being let go. I would have thought that the Romans and all those powerful people up at the temple would be more worried about people like me, or people who are actually raising arms to kick the Romans out of the country, than some misguided guy from Nazareth. What are they so afraid of? I wonder if there is actually more here than meets the eye. Maybe this guy and his followers actually do pose a threat to the Romans and the temple. I'm not sure how, but maybe they do. Well, I guess that's not my problem, because I am being set free. Although I do feel bad for this guy. Really, it should have been me. I wonder what this means for those who have traveled with him all this time. As I said, what can I do? I'm just a thief. But even though I am just a thief, he was actually really nice to me and treated me like I mattered. That hasn't happened for a long time. It is very sad that someone who seems so good has to be treated in this way. I don't think that this is going to turn out well for him. I can't imagine he ever imagined that this would happen to him. I never thought that I was going to get out of jail. I thought that I was going to be the one that died. But it seems the tables have turned.
Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him, saying, "Hail, the King of the Jews!" and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he has claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him. But the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon, and he said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed them over to be crucified.
I had heard the stories of this man who seemed to be stirring up so much trouble. But now that I have met him, I am not sure that I understand what all the fuss was about. It's not like he's a physically imposing man. Actually, he's rather small and soft-spoken. Yet they seem to be so wary of him. I tried to let him go, gave them the option, but it seems as if the vocal minority has gotten their way. I ended up releasing that criminal, Barabbas, who really should have been put on trial. And now they've demanded that I crucify this one, Jesus. I know that most of those who are out there this morning don't really know what is going on, but those Pharisees sure are vocal, and were yelling a lot for this man's death. I suppose this makes my life easier. Yeah, he seemed harmless, but as I listened to what he was saying, I can see that he could have become a danger if more people actually listened. He was speaking in a way that Rome would not have been happy about. He was challenging both the authority of Rome and of the temple, which helps us keep the common folk in line. So I guess this is for the best. It's time we all did our duty, no escaping the life that we have and the responsibility that goes along with it. That's the end of this mess then. Time to move this along.
So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, with Jesus between them. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. Then the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews." But this man said, "I am the King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who will get it." This was to fulfill what the scripture says, "They divided my clothes amongst themselves, and for my clothes they cast lots." And that is what the soldiers did. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home.
My son. My son. In reality, it is my son who is hanging from that cross. It is my son who has been rejected and abandoned by everyone who knew him, except for a small handful of followers. How did this happen? I remember clearly that day when I found out he was to be born. I had such high hopes for him, for our world. And it seems they've all come crashing down around us. What did he do that was so wrong? He only ever talked about love and peace, kindness and compassion. How does that lead to this? And yet, look at what he just did. In the midst of his own suffering, he was concerned about both myself and the follower he loves. Who does that? Now things are starting to make sense. When we came to him afraid of what he was saying, that it would upset people, we were offended when he said that we were not family. But it was not that we weren't family, but rather that family had a much larger meaning. It meant those whom we love. Why did this have to end this way? Why did it have to come to this? Are people so threatened by what he has said, what he lived, that they felt that this was their only choice? I grieve for my son, myself, and all those whose lives he touched, and for the world. Was it all for nothing? God, I hope not.
My soul cries out with a joyful shout that the God of my heart is great, and my spirit sings of the wondrous things that you bring to the
After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I am thirsty." And a jar of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Since it was the day of preparation, the Jews did not want the bodies left on the cross during the Sabbath, especially because that Sabbath was a great day of great solemnity. So they asked Pilate to have the legs of the crucified men broken and the bodies removed. Then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. He who saw this has testified, so that you may also believe. His testimony is true, and he knows that he tells the truth. These things occurred so that the scripture might be fulfilled. None of his bones shall be broken. And again, another passage of scripture says, "They will look on the one whom they have pierced." After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one, because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and removed his body. Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices and linen cloths according to the burial customs of the Jews. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had been laid. And so, because it was the Jewish day of preparation and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.
What happens now? So many of us have believed and followed, and now the one that we were following has been laid in a tomb. This was not what was supposed to happen. Things were supposed to be so different than the way they turned out. Nicodemus and I were the only ones there at the end of all of it, and I took a huge chance asking for Jesus' body, but we couldn't let him hang there until after Passover. We needed to do something out of respect for who he was, how much he meant to us, and how much we loved him. Everyone else seems to have scattered, and I can understand why. They must all be terrified because we never expected that they would kill Jesus just for speaking about a world based on love, justice, mercy, and compassion. But I guess it does make sense, doesn't it? All of those things that go against what is happening in the world right now. I've been in the shadows for so long, afraid to come out in public as a follower, all because I was afraid of what I might have to face. Yes, my fear of what I might have to face, and here is poor Jesus, killed for what he said, what he believed. Is this the end? What is tomorrow going to bring? I wish I knew. But I do know this. It doesn't matter what they've done. I will never forget Jesus and what he said, what he did, the love with which he lived, and the message that he was trying to give to all of us. I just hope that others never forget to.
Were you there when they crucified our Lord? Were you there when they crucified our Lord?
invite you to join me in prayer. God of mystery and wonder, because we know the ending of the story, it's tempting for us to ignore the darkness of this day. It's tempting for us to go about our business as usual. It's tempting for us to move too quickly to the dawn of light on Easter morning. But give us the courage and strength on this day to live for a while in the darkness, to set aside comfort and pleasure, to feel the darkness in which so many of your children dwell, the darkness into which your Son Jesus entered. As we reflect on the frailty of Christ, remind us of the frailty of all life. As we cringe at the suffering of Christ, make us mindful of suffering throughout the world. As we witness the death of Christ, bring us back full circle to the beginning of Lent, to the wisdom of Ash Wednesday, the awareness that each one of us was created in love through your creation. Gracious God, deep in the human heart is an unquenchable trust that life does not end with death. Like a seed which is buried in order to bring forth life, Christ goes to the tomb to usher in new life. We trust that we too will be raised to new life in this world here and now, and in the mystery of what lies beyond physical death. We trust that the whole world will be born anew, and that your kingdom is coming as a new heaven and a new earth. On this day of darkness, it is for this kingdom that we boldly pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever.